In a quiet Berlin office in 1930, a letter arrived for Albert Einstein. It wasn't from a world leader. It wasn't from a university. It was from a man the world would soon forget. But in that letter was the one word Einstein wasn't used to hearing. No, who was this man? Why did he refuse the greatest scientific mind of the 20th century? And why, after that moment, did he vanish? This isn't fiction, this is a true story. And once you hear it, you'll never forget it. History remembers the geniuses who shouted their discoveries to the world, but it often forgets the ones who whispered and disappeared. Today, we uncover the story of one such whisper, a man whose no changed the course of science and then vanished into silence. You're watching Still Rise, the silent side of greatness. We tell the stories the world forgot, so you never forget who shaped it in silence. In early 1930, Albert Einstein had already become a symbol of intellect. His theories had shaken Newton's world, and his lectures were packed with scientists eager to learn. But one proposal lingered unanswered, a theory Einstein believed could unify the chaotic world of quantum mechanics and relativity. He sent letters to his colleagues, mentors, and peers. Most responded with praise or silence, except one man, a quiet physicist named Hermann Wheeler. Not famous, not powerful, but honest. He read Einstein's work, paused, and wrote back, "This cannot work, not in its current form." He didn't refute Einstein rudely. He simply explained where he believed the theory fell apart line by line. It wasn't arrogance. It was clarity. Einstein respected criticism. But this time, something felt off. Because just weeks after sending that letter, Wheeler was never seen again. First, no one noticed Hermann Wheeler was gone. He wasn't a public figure. He wasn't giving speeches or publishing papers. He was a researcher in the shadows, content with silence, satisfied with truth. But those around him, neighbors, colleagues, started whispering. His apartment was empty. His typewriter was still warm, but Wheeler was gone. No police report was filed. No obituary was published. Only one thing remained, the last letter he ever sent to Albert Einstein. Einstein reportedly showed the letter to just 3 people. One was Niels Bohr, another titan of physics. Bohr read it, quietly folded it, and said nothing. But there's something you need to understand. This wasn't just academic disagreement. It was personal. Einstein had long feared something, that his unified field theory might never work. He had once said God does not play dice, but Wheeler's letter suggested maybe he did. Shortly after, Bohr visited Einstein, they argued. Not loudly, but deeply, and Einstein, for the first time in years, fell silent during a debate. The world never knew what that letter truly said. Einstein never published it. Wheeler never spoke again. Some said Wheeler had been taken. Some claimed he fled the country, and some believed he was silenced. But there's one problem with that theory. A year later, a journal in Sweden published an article with no author name, an article that predicted a discovery made 20 years later in quantum gravity. And in its margin, one handwritten note remained. The year was 1957, a quiet journal published in Uppsala, Sweden, known only to a few mathematical physicists, released an anonymous article. Its title? Non-Local Solutions to Unified Field Dynamics. Its content? Mind-bending. The article discussed concepts that wouldn't even have names until the 1990s: quantum entanglement, gravitational uncertainty, and non-local fields. For decades, physicists believed quantum mechanics and general relativity were incompatible. Wheeler, or whoever authored that paper, suggested they weren't, but here's where it gets stranger. In the margins of the manuscript, tucked in the university archives, was a folded note. One line only: what cannot be unified must be let go. This note, once again, bore no full name. Just initials. The same initials that ended the last letter ever seen by Albert Einstein. Could it be? Had Wheeler resurfaced under the radar? Was he alive, hiding, watching physics unfold from the shadows? Einstein passed away in 1955, never completing his unified field theory. But a week before his death, his nurse recalls seeing him reading a small paper, shaking his head, and smiling faintly. She asked what it was. He said only a reminder that the truth waits for no one. To this day, Einstein's final bedside drawer remains sealed in Princeton's archive, per a personal request in his will. Some believe it holds Wheeler's final letter. Others believe it holds a truth too dangerous to publish. So who is Herman Wheeler really? A forgotten genius? A hoax? Or the only man Einstein ever truly feared? But the mystery deepens. Because in 1971, 20 years after Wheeler vanished, a young student in Oxford discovered a book, one that was never published, but inside it, scribbled on the margins, were pages of equations and one familiar signature. The letter sat in Einstein's hand still. Not many people said no to him, and we did. It wasn't like this. It wasn't arrogant. It wasn't hostile. It was sincere, precise, almost philosophical. Einstein read it twice, then a third time. One line echoed, "Genius unchecked becomes destruction." The man who had written this, Emil Richter, wasn't doubting Einstein's brilliance. He was warning him. Emil believed science had a soul, and that without moral direction, it could become a monster in disguise. A quiet line in the letter said, "The atom is not your enemy, Professor, but your silence will be." Einstein was no stranger to ethics. He had fled Nazi Germany. He had spoken out against war. But Emil's words struck deeper, not just because they were bold, but because they felt true. He asked himself, am I helping humanity? Or am I handing it a loaded weapon and walking away? Yet science was moving fast. Too fast. The nuclear age was already being born in laboratories under fluorescent lights and political pressure. One part of him knew, if he didn't say yes, someone else would. And that is the trap many great minds fall into. A few weeks later, Einstein replied. A formal, respectful letter. But there was no apology, no agreement. Just this final line, history will decide whether you were right or forgotten. Emil never responded. No one ever saw him again. Some say he fled. Some say he died. Others say he simply let the world move on without him. Decades later, when Hiroshima burned and the world saw what atoms could do, a few physicists remembered Emil's name. But there was no statue, no book, no Nobel Prize. Just a letter. One word, no. And the silence of a man who once believed that the most powerful thing in the world was the courage to walk away. He had done what most wouldn't dare. He had challenged Einstein not with anger, not with arrogance, but with calm, silent conviction. And now Emil Ritter was gone. No academic papers followed, no lectures, no more letters, nothing. Just a name that slowly faded from the scientific archives. Like ink that dissolves in water. Why did he walk away? Some say fear, others shame. But those who studied the trail he left behind say something different. He had found something too big, too dangerous, too misunderstood. Emil Ritter didn't just say no to Einstein. He said no to the very direction physics was heading. Where Einstein was chasing the curvature of space, Ritter was chasing silence. Stillness, the gaps between energy. And then there was the cabin. Hidden deep in the Swiss Alps, years later, a shepherd reported a man living in near isolation, scribbling equations on cabin walls, meditating for hours, whispering to the wind. He called himself nobody. But the handwriting matched the original letter sent to Einstein in 1930. Was it him? No one knows for sure. But one day, even the cabin disappeared. It burned to the ground mysteriously, and the ashes held only one trace, a silver compass, engraved with the words, "The truth doesn't need to be accepted to be real." And Einstein? He never mentioned Emil again. But late in life, he kept a folded letter in his personal drawer, unlabeled, unpublished, untouched. And the first word on that letter? No, some men write history in ink. Others leave only whispers. The world never saw Reuter again, but whispers of him echoed in the strangest places. A German monk once claimed a man came to his monastery in 1933. He never gave a name, but he spoke in riddles about a structure behind, light about what gravity refuses to tell us and how numbers lie unless they pause. The monks thought he was mad, but one friar remembered him saying this: "We built physics like a cathedral, but forgot to test the ground beneath." Years passed. Wars erupted. Empires collapsed. But hidden in an Oxford library in 1947, a journal surfaced with no author name, no publication stamp. Just numbers, symbols, patterns, and the phrase, "The equation must not be solved, only understood." Scientists tried to decode it. Mathematicians dismissed it. But one professor found something else. A diagram that mirrored Einstein's unified field theory but rotated backward, as if someone had been trying to reverse reality. And the strangest part? The margins of the journal were filled with small sketches, birds, leaves, waves, natural forms repeating the same spiral, the golden ratio. Not just in beauty, but in force, in motion, in energy. Reuter hadn't disappeared. He had stepped out of science and into silence. What if the universe doesn't want to be explained? What if it only wants to be felt? That journal vanished too. No one knows who checked it out, but a note was left in its place. Some truths aren't lost. They're just waiting for someone quiet enough to hear them. In a world of noise, the man who said no to Einstein might have heard something deeper. The deeper scientists looked, the more they realized Reuter hadn't disappeared by accident. He had removed himself with intention. A physicist in Prague once said, he wasn't trying to change the world, he was trying to leave it unchanged. But why walk away? Why turn your back on the greatest scientific mind of the age, Albert Einstein himself? Because Reuter didn't see equations as answers. He saw them as questions wrapped in confidence. To him, modern physics wasn't wrong, it was incomplete. He once wrote in a margin barely legible, an answer that works mathematically may still be false in nature. He believed the universe wasn't linear, but recursive. Patterns looping, not progressing. Not a ladder, but a spiral. And here's the twist. Reuter wasn't just a physicist. He studied music theory, and he saw similarities between sound and force. He believed each particle in the universe was vibrating at a pitch. That gravity wasn't pulling, it was resonating. That energy wasn't exploding, it was humming. The universe is not silent, he wrote. It sings. And in our rush to measure it, we've forgotten how to listen. Einstein sought equations, Reuter sought harmony. And perhaps that's why he left. Because the world applauds the man who solves the puzzle, but it ignores the man who says, this puzzle was never ours to solve. In every great discovery, there's a silence before the applause. Reuter chose to stay in that silence forever. In late 1931, months after Reuter vanished, Einstein received another letter, this time not from Reuter. It was unsigned, but the handwriting was unmistakably his. Inside were 2 pages. No math, no diagrams, no theories, just questions. How do you know light isn't choosing its path? Why must everything be explained through force? Why are you measuring everything but listening to nothing? Einstein reportedly read the letter 3 times, then placed it in a drawer. That drawer was never opened again. He never replied, not because he couldn't, but perhaps because he realized this wasn't a debate, it was a departure. Reuter wasn't challenging Einstein's science, he was rejecting its foundation. While Einstein sought unity between gravity and quantum mechanics, Reuter asked, what if the contradiction isn't the problem, but the key? To Reuter, the universe wasn't supposed to make sense. It was supposed to remind us how small we are, and yet how deeply connected. We are not observers of the cosmos, he wrote. We are expressions of it, and that changed everything. But it left a question behind. What do you do when someone says no to the greatest mind alive and then walks away? You listen, not with your ears, but with your attention. Because not every silence is emptiness. Some silences are answers. Years passed. The world spiraled into war, then rose from the ashes again. Einstein became a legend. Relativity was no longer questioned, it was taught. But Reuter? He became a rumor. A whisper. Until 1978. In the quiet hills of Switzerland, a small monastery decided to digitize its ancient records. Among the scrolls and birth records, they found a box, unmarked, inside. Worn notebooks, letters, and one photograph. A man standing beside a waterfall, no shoes, no name. But the handwriting on the pages matched the one in Einstein's forgotten drawer. Reuter hadn't died. He had vanished on purpose. In these notebooks, he wrote not about science, but about observation without control. About existence without domination. The leaf does not calculate how it falls, he wrote. It simply trusts gravity. That is faith. His pages were filled with silence, not empty pages, but intentional space. As if his very absence of words was a message. He believed modern science had become a mirror of ego man trying to conquer the unknown. Reuter wanted something else, to be absorbed by it, to dissolve the boundary between the observer and the observed. He didn't want to prove Einstein wrong. He wanted to prove the world didn't need a winner. It needed humility. The monks said he lived among them for 19 years. He never used his real name. He taught nothing, but they said he listened like the stars were talking. In silence, in exile, he may have understood something we're only now beginning to grasp, that some minds don't want to be understood. They want to disappear into meaning. Einstein lived out his final years in the United States, surrounded by admiration awards and silence. But behind closed doors, he often reread that one letter. The one with just a single word? No. His assistant said he kept it in his drawer beneath everything else, but never removed it. It was not bitterness, not confusion, it was something deeper. One afternoon, in 1953, Einstein gave a lecture to a group of young physicists, but midway through, he paused. His hand rested on the chalkboard. He looked up far past them as if trying to recall a name lost in fog. And then he said something strange. The most brilliant man I ever met never built anything, never taught, and never proved a thing. But he understood what none of us dared to. The students laughed nervously. Einstein did not. He was talking about Reuter. When pressed privately, Einstein admitted something even more surprising. He once wrote in his journal, maybe he was right to walk away. Perhaps truth is not in proving, but in perceiving. What haunted Einstein was not that Reuter rejected him. It was that he may have been the only person to see a limit in Einstein's vision and choose silence over glory. The man remembered for unlocking the universe couldn't forget the man who refused to open the door. Einstein died in 1955. Among his final possessions, tucked in an envelope, was a photograph of a waterfall. No name, but if you look closely, the man in the photo had no shoes. For decades, Einstein's belongings were archived, boxed, studied. But the photograph found in his final possessions was never officially recorded. It was passed along quietly from one archivist to another until it ended up in a file labeled only unclaimed. In 1987, a junior historian in Munich named Elsa Brenner stumbled upon the image while researching Einstein's correspondence. She almost threw it away until she saw the note on the back, Sils Maria 1936. He never explained, he only watched. Sils Maria, a village in the Swiss Alps, quiet, remote, not far from where Nietzsche once walked, and where, according to local records, a barefoot man lived near a stream, never speaking, never asking, just watching. Locals remembered him, They called him Der Schatten, the Shadow. He didn't give a name, but he carved strange patterns into the stones near the waterfall, symbols. Some said it was math, others said poetry. Elsa Brenner traced the story further. She found one hiker's journal dated 1942. I passed the waterfall at dusk. There was a man still barefoot. He nodded as I walked by. I don't know why, but I wept. Could it have been ruder? He would have been in his 40s by then. No record of death. No passport trails, no relatives. Just a man who said no to Einstein and quietly vanished into the mountains. And what of the symbols carved in stone? Decades later, physicists translated one of them. Energy does not speak, it only listens. No one could explain what that meant. But in the silence of the Alps, beneath centuries of rushing water, those symbols remain. And some say so does the man. In the world of science, truth is often found through formulas, experiments, and proofs. But sometimes truth hides in what can't be measured, in silence and stillness. In one man's quiet refusal, Ernst Reuter never published again. His last known letter was never sent. It was found unsealed in a book on Spinoza, Einstein's favorite philosopher. Its final line: perhaps the truth isn't something we can name. Perhaps it's something we must become. Einstein never mentioned him again. But years later, in a rare interview, he was asked, "Do you believe in absolute knowledge?" Einstein paused, then said, "I believe in those who say no when the world expects yes." No one understood what he meant, but maybe now. You do. Who is Reuter? A physicist, a philosopher, a mystic, or just a man who realized that knowing too much can sometimes mean forgetting what it means to simply be? In the decades that followed, his story faded. No biography, no gravestone, only symbols on stone, only a photograph by a stream, only one word, no. And in that no, a truth louder than any theory ever written, because some men change the world by speaking, but a rare few change it by walking away. In an age of noise, silence is the last rebellion. Unknown. What we learn from this, sometimes saying no is the most powerful thing you can do, not to rebel, not to reject, but to remain aligned with your soul, even when the world doesn't understand. Ernst Reuter didn't vanish because he was weak. He stepped away because he valued silence over noise, truth over fame, and integrity over attention. In a world obsessed with being seen, he taught us the quiet art of disappearing with dignity. And maybe that's a kind of genius we don't talk about enough. If this story made you pause, if it whispered something to your inner voice, then don't let it fade. Reflect on this. What have you been saying yes to when deep down your heart wanted to say no? Let us know in the comments, even just with a single word: silence. If you felt something today, subscribe to Still Rise for more stories that speak to the soul calmly, quietly, and truthfully. Because in a loud world, stillness is a strength, and your rise begins in silence.